Hi, and welcome to Girls Lunch, your mealtime companion, where we talk about food, gender, sexuality, and where everyone is welcome.
I'm Nicole Hilton.
I'm Julia Andreas.
And Julia, how do you feel about trains?
I love trains. I wouldn't say I was a train-obsessed kid, but I love the aesthetic of trains. I love the history of trains. I think any story that is on a train, like that's just my kind of favorite setting. I'll eat that up.
Murder on the Orient Express is your shit.
Hell yes, yeah. Especially circus trains. For some reason, that genre is just like chef's kiss to me. I love it.
Yeah. You did write a novel. Well, I guess it was just more about a circus, not necessarily a circus train. Or was it a circus train?
It was kind of about the circus train and the murder that happened there.
Right.
Someone shot the ringmaster.
Why is everybody killing people on trains?
It's just like, it just has like that aesthetic of, ooh, murder and mystery. And
yeah.
Train.
And train. That's the key part. Well, you will be excited to know that we will talk a lot about train today. Or at least, like, I want you to envision that today's episode, like, takes place on a train.
Oh, I'm 100% there.
Yeah, imagine that you and I are on, maybe not like that meme where there's like the happy guy on the one side of the train and there's a sad guy on the other side of the train. I think we are both just two happy guys on either side of that train as we are rolling westward across beautiful hills, valleys, this great nation of ours, God's country, the USA. So while we are on this train, we're going to learn about the history of our great nation by proxy of a man named Fred Harvey.
It's him!
It is him. He's a man who rode a lot of trains, and the Harvey Girls, also who we're going to be talking about today, the Harvey Girls are women who fed a lot of people that rode a lot of trains.
Oh.
So, yes, maybe not on the trains. The Harvey Girl, we'll talk about it, but people get off train, Harvey Girl feed them.
People get back on train?
People get back on train, yes. I'm sort of being facetious when I'm saying, like, this great nation of ours, because we're going to talk about settler colonialism. We are going to talk a lot about the history of America, or at least, like, a portion of it, because the Fred Harvey story runs from, like, a good 100 years of American history, honestly.
Oh, dang.
Which, we might not get to all of that in this episode, but we are going to talk at least about, like, some major things like the railroad, obviously, how we go from trains to automobiles to the interstate highway. We're going to talk about the evolution of hospitality and dining out, which we did a little bit in the previous episode, so I think this will be a good, like, dovetail. We're going to talk about the Civil War, World War I, World War II, the sequel, the flu pandemic, the fiscal irresponsibility of the turn of the century in the 1920s, the Great Depression. We probably won't get to all of them because there's way too many, but in the 400-page book that I read, there are many celebrities that also show up in the Fred Harvey story.
Ooh.
So Judy Garland, F. Scott Fitzgerald, multiple presidents. We're going to talk about Teddy Roosevelt. All of this is to just say that, like, they have connections with lots of people that are important to American history.
I feel like we are in some sort of movie that has an incredibly star-studded cast.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. This is like the Ocean's 11 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's in it. To, again, like, sort of set the table of where... And again, I feel like I'm doing a lot of hyping, which I hope is going to pay off. But I would like for you, Julia, to read the quote that I've highlighted for you. This is from the prologue to Appetite for America by Stephen Fried, which is the aforementioned 400-page book that I read. If, dear listener, any of this interests you, I would highly recommend checking that book out. I loved it. I bought a copy, which should tell you something.
She doesn't usually do that.
I love the local library. But anyway, so this is from the prologue to Appetite for America.
All right. Fred Harvey was Ray Kroc before McDonald's, J.W. Marriott before Marriott Hotels, Howard Johnson before Hojo's, Joe Horn and Frank Hardart before Horn and Hardarts, Howard Schultz before Starbucks. More than any single organization, the Fred Harvey system introduced America to Americans. wrote a historian in the 1950s. Dang.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And you will see why. But we should start with the man himself, Frederick Henry Harvey. Julia, please go to the first slide for a picture of this man.
He has some fantastic facial hair.
He does. He's a very proper looking gentleman.
Yeah, shall I describe him briefly?
Yes, if you would like.
Okay, black and white photo of he looks kind of tall, like a tall, lean man in a nice coat. He's got a little pocket watch chain, a little bow tie. He looks very prim. He's got fantastic mustache, goatee, soul patch combo. And he's got a little sparkle in his eye, I'd say.
He does. That is the sparkle of
America.
Business opportunity. Yes, America. So he's born in England in 1835 to a working class family that does eventually go bankrupt, like to the point where his dad goes to debtor's prison.
Oh.
So a fun start to his youth. So the Fred Harvey origin story starts the way a lot of bootstrap narratives do. So the way the story usually gets told is, at age 15, Fred leaves England for America with only a few dollars, well, I mean, actually a few pounds in his pocket, and arrives in New York City. There's been some research done that says that he may have actually left in 1853, and he was probably 17, so like 2 years later, but it's a rounder number for him to say he was 15.
Mm-hmm.
He leaves England not only because, like, you know, he doesn't have many opportunities, you know, from his family background, and he wants to make it in America, but the Crimean War is also imminent, and he's like, I would like to not go to war. I do not want to be drafted, so I'm gonna dip out of here. And so he dips to the U.S. Julia, please go to the next slide. On our train ride, as we are chugging along across the U.S., we have a couple of history stops that I'd like to make. So, shh. That's the train pulling into the station.
Whoa! That's me almost falling over because I was definitely standing and not sitting.
Yeah, you have to hold onto the handrail, you silly goose.
But I wanted to subway surf.
Okay, so our first stop on the U.S. history train is this map, which Julia is looking at, but it's basically just a map of the U.S. showing when states achieve statehood, when do things become like territories. So the part that I would call your attention to is, so we're talking about, when we talk about the West, quote unquote, really goes up to like Kansas when Fred Harvey arrives in the U.S., right?
Mm-hmm.
Kansas is not a state until 1861, and that is actually where a lot of Fred's like history takes place. The family, like, he settles in Kansas, and his first restaurants and stuff are in Kansas. So basically, like, Kansas is the West, quote unquote, right? Further west than that, we haven't, like, as a country expanded all the way to like California, Washington State yet. This territory is considered savage land, and I'm using very heavy quotes here. It's dangerous, uncivilized. The dangerous part might be true to some degree, just because, like, territory that's like supposedly like up for grabs that people are fighting over. Obviously, the idea of it being like savage land and uncivilized is a very like white settler colonialist way of thinking. I want to mention this just because, like, the Fred Harvey story is so deeply intertwined with westward expansion. You really don't get the Fred Harvey does not become who he is without westward expansion and without, like, kicking a lot of indigenous people off of their land in the name of, like, U.S. statehood. So, let's see, I mean, by this point in history, the Trail of Tears has happened, so we've kicked the Cherokee, the Chickasaw, the Muskogee, the Creek, and the Seminole peoples out of the East Coast and moved them west of the Mississippi. There are definitely a lot of conflicts happening with the white settlers trying to move in and claim farmland, and the indigenous peoples of the Great Plains, so the Cheyenne, the Comanche, the Ojibwe, the Sioux, lots of others. Those indigenous peoples have been fighting settlers for quite some time, which is sort of, I would guess, like, how they get the reputation of, like, being dangerous and uncivilized, because, like, there's indigenous people there who want to keep their land, and we're like, no, that's for us, because we said so.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the map, and I think, like, you know, my American history is lacking, my American history knowledge. But I find it so fascinating how late all of these state formations and purchases were, just in the sense of, like, Montana, where I'm at, didn't even become a state until, I think that says 1989.
No, that can't be right. It's got to be 1889.
Sorry, I meant to say 1889. I did not mean 1989. That is not correct at all.
Yeah, I mean, but Arizona, where I just recently moved from, did not become a state until 1912, you know?
There's New Mexico, also 1912, and it's just kind of wild how, like, I don't know, the idea of America has been so ingrained into our brains as being, like, a unified country for so long, for, like, ever, that it's wild to kind of look at the pieces and parts and be like, oh, we didn't really even get around to having all of the states until, like, 100 years ago. That's not long at all.
Yeah, exactly. So back to Fred Harvey, the man, the myth, the legend, before he is a myth and a legend.
And just a man.
Just a man. Just a simple man. Little Fred Harvey gets a job immediately in New York City as a dishwasher at this restaurant called Smith and McNell's, which is huge. It is well known for its fresh food and full restaurant service. They are open 24 hours a day, which I think is something to be said.
Yeah, that was not common.
Yeah, in like 1853, 1855, whatever it is. From there, he works his way kind of up the ranks. He becomes a line cook, and he learns a lot of the restaurant trade here at this first job. He then moves around a little bit. He tries out New Orleans. He's like, this isn't really for me. Then he goes to St. Louis, which again, at this point in history is a, I guess you could, maybe border town is the right word, right? Things are pretty tense there because it's like kind of on the border between what is U.S. states and not. In St. Louis, he runs a restaurant/saloon with a partner. His partner runs the saloon part. He runs the restaurant part. They split the profits. It does pretty well until 1861 when the Civil War breaks out.
Oh no!
It is full chaos in St. Louis. Like, they have to declare martial law and everything. And in all of the chaos, Fred's business partner runs off with the money from the business, which would be about $43,000 in today's money.
That's just rude.
And leaves Fred with nothing. So Fred basically has to start all over. I mean, he has, like, the skills, but he doesn't have any capital.
Ain't that just the way?
It is big sad.
You and your friends start a business, and then they take your monies and leave you in St. Louis.
Julia, I have something to tell you about all of our fabulous podcast
Are you
revenue.
in St. Louis right now?
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
That's okay. We lose money on this
all
podcast.
Of our no
That's
monies.
I put it all in Bitcoin.
Oh, no. Should have been Dogecoin.
Okay, so Fred Harvey is now broke. He also, around this time, faces some tragedy in his personal life. So he himself becomes deathly ill with typhoid fever, like almost dies, has like a near-death experience, but miraculously kind of survives. It takes him months to recover, but the disease like permanently affects his health and his body. Like, it's so bad that he is able to avoid the draft for the Civil War.
Wow.
Because the army is like, nah, we're not going, you stay home. You're no good to us. It's in a way that, like, it is hard to diagnose old-timey diseases just because, you know, didn't really have, like, doctors or really good, you know, ways of documenting these things back then. But I think he calls it neuralgia, but some of it is, like, maybe depression, maybe nervous exhaustion, nerve pain, migraines, headaches, something like that. He also has a lot of digestive issues. A man in good company in this podcast with tummy troubles.
Yep.
And we see that and we respect that.
Solidarity.
Yep. If you're a Sawbones fan, he tries a lot of patent medicines for this, but he doesn't really get anywhere because it's, I think, you know, hard to say exactly what it is he has.
Also maybe because patent medicines don't do anything.
Yeah. I mean, that's also true. So, additional personal tragedies. His first wife, Anne, passes away in 1862 after complications from giving birth to their second child. And then 3 years later, in 1865, this is especially sad, there's a scarlet fever epidemic that sweeps through town, and both of his sons pass away within 2 weeks of each other. They are only 4 and 2 years old, which I imagine had to be devastating. I mean, putting aside the like, oh yeah, you know, kids died all the time back in old-timey times, but like, I don't know. Within 2 weeks of each other is like, that's gotta be fucking rough.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking.
So Fred does get remarried in 1863 to a Czechoslovakian woman named Sally, which you can see in the next slide, Julia.
Ooh. Sally looks like she's seen some shit.
Yeah, Sally puts up with a lot.
She looks like she puts up with a lot.
Yeah, I would say she looks like a very hearty woman. Hearty, both of those probably. She and Fred end up having 5 kids together.
Wow.
Who all live to adulthood, which is nice. Who we will hear about some of them, not all of them, because again, time's sake, but they have Ford, Minnie, May, Byron, and Sybil. So they have 3 girls, 2 boys. So that's Fred's personal life for now. So Fred Harvey is an entrepreneur, right? He is a businessman.
Yeah.
He's a man of business. So because like he and Sally now have this growing family, he takes up several jobs that all are going to sort of culminate in Harvey houses, which is what we are eventually building towards here. So while he is in this stage of like being a, you know, kind of youngish father with a growing family to support, he works a couple of different jobs. He works for the Postal Service. He does logistics for deliveries via boat and train. He actually helps pilot the mail by train system. So like sending mail by the train, which we still use today, which is cool.
That is cool.
He also works for the railroad as a ticketing agent and then a sales agent. And then he works for some newspapers selling advertisements. Do you see any patterns with these jobs, Julia?
I see a lot of travel, a lot of like shipping, and I also see kind of like the means of supply and the means of demand if he's putting out ads.
Yeah, so good answer. I'm glad that I took our podcast royalties and used that to pay you to say that. The answer I was looking for was travel. Yes, so Fred has to do a lot of traveling for work, right? He's not just like, I mean, we don't have computers, we don't have phones at this point. Mm-hmm. I think we have telegraph. All the same, like, to do all of these, like, selling things and traveling, like, it's the, like, traveling salesman type of jobs, right? So, like, he is also going on the train and selling ads for the newspaper, selling tickets for the railroad, all those types of things. So he himself is doing a lot of traveling, mostly by train. So while he's doing all this traveling, Fred is appalled by the state of the hospitality industry at the time, mostly because it does not exist yet. As we kind of talked about in the previous episode, if you were traveling, it was a lot of like, you get what you get and you don't mind a bit in terms of like restaurants and hotels and things like that.
Yeah.
This is especially true since he's going westward in a lot of cases where there's just not the infrastructure yet, right? It's just sort of like a cobbled together, like, I don't know, you can sleep here probably. Or like, I don't know, this is probably food.
Watch out for bears.
Yeah. So the way dining works at this point, if you are traveling by train, is, so the train has to make several stops on its way to the final destination to refuel. We haven't quite figured out the, like, long distance trains yet to, like, get the train to go from, I don't know, New York to Chicago, going westbound at this many miles an hour, just like in all those nightmare math problems.
Oh, no.
So the train has to make a lot of stops to, like, refuel. And while the train is being refueled, passengers get, like, 20 minutes to get off, stretch their legs, and eat at the trackside restaurant. Because if you are traveling, you're either going to, like, pack yourself a meal, or you're going to eat at the trackside restaurant. You know, I don't know how much of this is apocryphal, how much of this is, like, really true, but all the reports say that while the train is stopped for, like, 20 minutes, the people who are running the trackside restaurant, like, take their sweet time getting food together. It's possible that they just, like, took the food from the previous people who were just there and, like, put it on a new plate.
Oofa.
They also like would coordinate with the railroad to like, so like people would pay for their food and they'd eat like a little bit and then they'd get the train conductor to come by and be like, oh, time to get back on. And they would like maybe not have finished eating, and then the people running the restaurant could just be like, yoink, I'm gonna serve these eggs to the next guy or whatever.
This is how I felt the last like few times I've flown. It's just like, I feel like I am but a little scrap of a tumbleweed being tossed to and fro at the whim of big travel and convenient restaurant.
That's actually, it's funny because my grandpa was saying this the other day of like, he feels like the airlines and all the restaurants and stuff in the airport are like in cahoots to like delay your flight so that you have to hang around and like shop and eat there and pay for all the overpriced stuff. And I'm like that is a little bit of a conspiracy theory, Papu, but I do almost believe it a little bit. It does feel like it could be true. So from these like terrible travel experiences, Fred Harvey, who is already a man suffering from tummy troubles and health problems, he like has a rough go of it, right? He's like, this sucks, as is, you know, a correct thought to have. And he, as a businessman, knows that he can invent a better system, right? He's like, I could do this way better. I have experience in the restaurant business and I know about travel now from all of my many jobs. So his idea, which I guess seems radical, but is not really, is to give passengers affordable, tasty, quality food and exceptional service at train depot restaurants. Wild
thought to have.
Yeah, which is what a lot of train executives thought when he went to their offices pitching this idea. He went to several railroads and they were just like, yeah, okay, sure, bud. So he goes to many different railroads, which there are many of at this point, and nobody goes for it until he gets to the Santa Fe Railroad. Okay, hopefully the train conductor has come by and like rung the little bell, letting us know that we are slowing down to go to our next U.S. history stop.
Ooh.
Which is not really a stop because I'm just stopping us to tell you we don't have time to stop here.
Oh.
Obviously, we're talking about the railroad, and we could stop on U.S. history stop number 2 and talk about the politics and the history surrounding the American Railroad, but there is a lot. The short version is, at this point in history, there are a lot of competing railroads who are just all trying to lay down tracks as fast as possible and get as many passengers and sell as many tickets as they can. Basically, like, we don't need to get into all of U.S. history when it comes to the railroad. What you need to know is the Santa Fe Railroad is not run by a robber baron or a, like, major rich guy like Andrew Carnegie. It is a much smaller business at this point, which is why they kind of go for Fred's idea. They're like, huh, interesting. Fred Harvey secures a handshake deal, which is kind of how he does all of his business, which means like nothing was written down. It's just sort of like, an agreement between gentlemen, which doesn't end up coming back to bite him too many times, which is interesting. But he secures a handshake deal with the Santa Fe Railroad to set up what they call an eating house in the train depot at their Topeka, Kansas station. Eating house is the like term that keeps getting used throughout most of my research, which is interesting because it's not quite a restaurant, but it's not quite like a hotel or anything like that. At least not right away. We'll get there.
I think it's just so cool to hear. Like, because the previous episode, the one on restaurants that I did, a lot of the research that I was able to find was, like, in Britain, in France, and kind of, like, how it was developing in the 1800s over there. And didn't really get to touch on too much, like, the restaurant development over in the Americas. And, like, eating house was not a word I came across at all in my research. So it's just really cool to see the comparison and how things are like coming about differently.
Yeah, and I don't know if I am familiar with the term eating house outside of this research either, but I am like, no, it weirdly feels right. Instead, like, restaurant doesn't feel quite it. It's like, yeah, it is a place where people go and eat. You're right there. That is what it says on the tin. Fred secures a handshake deal to set up an eating house in Topeka, Kansas. Because Fred is a good businessman, he basically convinces the Santa Fe that they would be stupid not to take this deal. he convinces them to carry a lot of the operating costs of the eating house, which means like it's easier for him to make a profit because the railroad is responsible for paying a lot of the costs. Julia, if you would like to see the very first eating house,
Ooh.
you can go to the next slide.
Oh, it's cute.
Yeah, so you can kind of see in the picture that there are like railroad tracks right next to the building.
Yeah.
So if you just think of like a train depot, I mean, train comes up, stops, people get off, and they walk like a couple of feet to the building to eat, and then they get back on the train.
You know, this looks like and reminds me of my grandmother's house in North Carolina. I don't think you've ever actually been there, Nicole.
I haven't. It is a legendary place to me.
It is just like a very historic place in general because it used to be a train station.
Oh my God.
And a post office. And just like in this photo, like that's the same distance from the house to the train tracks. Maybe actually a little more distance, but it's like right there. The house is like right next to the train tracks.
Yeah.
Just on the other side of the fence.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I'm curious because like I know the depot where my grandma's house has evolved into a house, was used for lumber. I don't know if it would have like the same sort of amenities that maybe this kind of train station would have, but it's just so funny. I look at that Harvey house and I think, oh, it looks kind of like my grandma's house.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's possible. I will admit, because I know your grandma lives down in North Carolina. I don't know what the system was like down south. I mostly know about, obviously, like headed westward. So, like I said, the first eating house in Topeka is very successful. It's not long before the Santa Fe approaches Fred and says, like, hey, could you do more of these, please? Fred strikes a deal with them to start taking over their eating houses, like the train depot restaurants, I guess would be another way of saying it, that are along the railroad line. I want to talk about the Harvey system, which it's Harvey everything. It's Harvey all the way down. But like the reason that the eating house or the Harvey house is so successful is because of this Harvey system, which is basically like Fred's way of doing business. So as his business expands, Fred starts standardizing his practices across all Harvey houses.
Ooh, standardization, nice.
Yeah. What does that sound like to you, Julia? Sound like anything to you?
What, standardization?
Yeah. I mean, to me, this makes me think of like franchising.
Yes, absolutely.
So like in the way that you franchise like a fast food restaurant, right? All McDonald's have a set of rules that they're supposed to follow from Big McDonald, from Ronald himself,
from the clown himself,
from like headquarters that then like is like when you go to any McDonald's, it's supposed to be the same regardless of if you're in Topeka, Kansas, or if you're in San Francisco, California, right? So it's very much the same in Harvey houses. Fred is very principled. He likes things to be done a particular way, and he visits all of the Harvey houses regularly to make sure that these rules are being followed.
Oh, undercover boss.
Oh, yeah, except employees like will sometimes try to warn the other employees of like, hey, big boss is coming on the next train or whatever. But inevitably there are a lot of like, I guess, scare stories where Fred shows up at a Harvey house and things are, like, not up to par, and he just fires people. Like, he just will fire, like, a whole staff. The famous, like, story that I hear a lot, or read in a lot of my research, is, like, if the table is set incorrectly or something, he will yank the tablecloth and, like, send all of the plates flying.
Oh.
Which is not cheap, because Fred imports all of his china and silver and these fancy white tablecloths from Europe, usually Ireland and England, which is not cheap.
No.
So he has a little bit of a temper, but this is his way of enforcing like the standard, right? That his restaurants should be clean, efficient, and affordable. He has high standards for his employees and customers when it comes to dress code, manners, language, cleanliness. Men are required to wear jackets if they are sitting in the dining room. There's a rule, especially in like the Western Harvey houses, like further west, where they say like, you can't bring your gun into the dining room because that's like a problem. because of all the cowboys that come in, apparently. They're like,
Wow.
Sir, I'm sorry, you have to leave your gun up here at front if you want to eat.
I bet those true American cowboys were not a fan of that.
No, there are a lot of rough and tumble scraps that happen. So basically, like, I mean, what Fred is enforcing is, like, what we think of as hospitality today, right? The idea of, like, the customer is always right, the customer deserves respect and to be taken care of. I have heard the Harvey system described as, like, detail plus courtesy, courtesy plus detail. I mean, if you study, like, hospitality or anything like that, like, this is basic stuff, right? But this was not always the case, I guess.
Yeah, it's called the Wild West for a reason.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people were just kind of like, I am alive today, therefore I will try to stay alive. And not much of like, oh, would you like me to take your coat, sir? Let me hang it on this hanger for you.
May I take your hat, sir?
May I take your hat, sir? Yeah, I feel like, you know, especially in the West. And, like, also keeping in mind, I guess, that Fred Harvey was English. I can imagine him coming to the States and seeing the West and being like, the fuck is this? Like, this is a mess.
That's true. I didn't really think about that, but yeah, I mean, England is very, like, it's very, like, structured and regimented in that way that American society is not. I don't know. I mean, we've sort of talked about, like, why are the Harvey houses so successful? It's for these reasons. It's also for other reasons. Coffee. Apparently,
Coffee.
Everybody says Fred Harvey coffee is, like, the best coffee ever. People love it. People are wild for it. They also, this is just such a tiny fun fact that I love and I'm obsessed with. Fred Harvey pie is bigger than average pie in the sense that, like, if you order a slice of pie, picture, Julia, a whole pie.
Yeah.
You normally cut it into, like, 6 or 8 pieces, right? If you go to a Harvey house and get a piece of pie, they cut that pie in 4 pieces.
Damn.
So you are getting a big chunk of pie.
This really does scream American to me and hits everything we love, which is coffee and bigger than average chunks of sweet treats.
Yes. And pretty girls, which are the Harvey Girls.
Oh yeah, we do like those.
I will tell you whomst are the Harvey Girls and what's their whole deal. But why don't you give me the food fact of the day first, Julia?
I would love to. So actually, my food fact of the day was going to be about Miracle Whip.
Ooh.
But then I realized that I'd have to do more research than I was willing to do. So instead, today's fun
Take your time.
I don't even have a concussion anymore. I don't have an excuse. Today's fun food fact is about salads. And I feel like salads are a super fascinating group of foods. Like, a salad could be just like lettuce and croutons and cheese. It could be like other vegetables. It could also be something without any of those things, like a potato salad or an egg salad or a tuna salad, or it could just be fruit. You could have a fruit salad.
Yummy, yummy.
And so the food fact of the day is, what does the word salad even mean? Etymologically, the first part of salad is sal, which means salt in Latin. According to the Oxford Companion to Food, salad is a term derived from the Latin sal, salt, which yielded the form salata, salted things, such as the raw vegetables eaten in classical times with a dressing of oil, vinegar, and salt. The word turns up in Old French as salade, and then in late 14th century English as salad or salat. So the dish salad is actually named after having a dressing of oil, salt, and vinegar.
Oh.
And so salads started out as dressed vegetables and evolved into tossed, quote, salads, or an array of vegetables tossed in a dressing. In the 19th century, the messy tossed salad gave way to more orderly, arranged salads, maybe something you'd see at like a Harvey eating house. And they had their ingredients separated and organized, kind of like a Cobb salad or a niçoise, if you've seen either of those. Fun fact, Cheesecake Factory has a fantastic vegan Cobb salad. I love it.
Good to know, because I do not care for a Cobb salad, so maybe I would like a vegan version instead.
Yeah, it's got like none of the unusual ingredients of a Cobb salad. And then, you know, the trend of like orderly salads were super popular, and that led to Jello and gelatin coming into the picture to create essentially immovable salads that could not become out of place because they were frozen in time in gelatin.
Much like a fly in amber, those fruits were trapped within a sticky gelatin substance.
But because Jello salads are gross, they fell out of favor, and tossed salads of various flavors and ingredients have become, the normal again. So, like any kind of salad you could have. Really popular these days, I feel like, are a lot of, like, noodle salads. You got, like, soba noodles and, like, a peanut dressing. I do love those. And so, to answer the question of SpongeBob's question in particular of what is a salad, it is anything that has a dressing.
But do you put dressing on fruit salad?
Yeah, usually you have like a light dressing of it's usually like honey or something kind of like that. It's like a sugary dressing. It's not something you would consider like savory.
I think I'm too much of a white person that I just put like watermelon cubes and melon cubes and grapes in a bowl, and I'm like, that's fruit salad.
It could be.
But, well, if we're saying that salad must have a dressing, then no, it couldn't. And I have just been making mixed fruit this whole time.
Yeah, I guess in that case, yeah, you've just been making a bowl of mixed fruit. Perhaps fruit cereal?
Oh, no, that's another debate.
So now that you know about salads, Nicole, is it time to get wiggy with it?
Yes, it is indeed time to get wiggy with it. I think this might be the part of the episode that I think you're most excited about, Julia, is learning about the Harvey Girls.
I mean, I'm excited for all of it, but I still am in the dark about the Harvey Girls, and I am so excited to learn all about them.
You have been good and not looking at spoilers on the internet.
Yeah, I have zero knowledge.
Which is good, because I've been doing this research for several months now. Okay, so let's talk about the Harvey Girls. They are a bit famous if you know about, like, Fred Harvey restaurants or Harvey houses. You probably know about the Harvey Girls. So I'll tie us back to our previous episode about, like, women in restaurants. I think we might have discussed this in the previous episode, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure it came up in your research, Julia, but for quite some time, waitressing was, like, not a job for good girls, right?
Yes.
Or for honest women's to have.
Yeah.
Waitressing did not have a good reputation. I don't know how much you know about that.
I think I probably know less than you at this point, but I can I can obviously gather that, like, a woman of any sort of society above poor or even, like, most working class would not be a waitress or, like, work in a restaurant.
Yeah. There's definitely an association between... It's a thin line between being a waitress and being a prostitute or something like that.
Yeah. Which
I don't really get. I guess it's like you're serving people. I don't know.
It might also be like, I don't know, maybe this is another podcast episode, but like the idea of brothels. And
yeah.
I'm pretty sure brothels could also serve food and drink in some cases. And kind of maybe that's where the connection came from, where these women who were also sex workers were also serving you food. Or maybe it's not that, and we need to do an episode on it.
That's true, because we didn't really talk too much about waitresses in the Women Be Eaten episode. So maybe there's something there. We'll just put a pin in that for the future.
Yeah, put a pin in that.
But the short version is, like, waitressing does not have a good reputation at this point. At first, it's more common practice for black men to be waiters in restaurants at this point in history, which is what Harvey houses do originally. But, we are not far out from the Civil War. There's still a lot of racial tension. My God, there's still racial tension in America today. I mean, it's especially, like, things are especially tense in the, like, aftermath of the Civil War. Cowboys and rough and tumble white men would not be happy that, I don't know, that they had to exist in the same space as a black person, I guess, and things would spill over into violence. So one of Fred's employees suggests, like, what if instead for wait staff, we hired young white women, not local women, but what if we imported good girls from, farming country, the Midwest, or, the Midwest is the West at this point, but or girls from back east to be waitresses, because the idea is all of these rough and tumble customers would not be so rough and tumble or violent if they were being waited on by these proper ladies.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
It's really whack. That, it's so wacky.
The coastal supremacy, roots, I see that.
Yeah.
In the sense of, girls from the East Coast, or maybe even just not from the West, as somehow superior.
Yeah. It's because they come from civilization, right?
Yeah.
And something that you might not know, or listeners may not know, is at this point in the West, the gender ratio, it is very densely populated with men. There are very few women who are out living in this part of the country at this point because it's uncivilized. By that I mean it's mostly men who are ranchers, or they work on the railroad, young middle-aged men who are just working for themselves. There's a lot of I don't know, it feels very yucky to me, where a lot of these articles that I read for doing research for this topic are these men haven't seen a proper woman in the last several years, and I'm oh,
whoa,
I feel bad for her. I don't know, that's my reaction.
Yeah.
There's a really good article from the National Park Service that talks about women of color working as Harvey Girls. I don't have time to get into it right now, but basically I would encourage you to go read the article. The short version is that Fred Harvey Company didn't start hiring local girls until later in the company's history, when they basically started running out of white women to hire. And they were dang, all of our good proper white girls have gotten married. I guess we'll start, I don't know, hiring women of color. So the way they recruit Harvey Girls is they put ads in newspapers, which is easy for Fred to do since he, worked for newspapers selling ads.
Aha. It comes back.
It does come back around. So he runs ads in many newspapers back east looking for, quote, young women of good character, attractive, and intelligent, 18 to 30 years of age. So they're also relatively young.
This is the male celebrity dating range.
Yeah, 100%.
They'll date you from 18, and honestly 30 is being generous. They usually dump you at 25.
Yeah,
but,
I was going to say, these are Leo DiCaprio's girlfriends.
Yeah, these are these are girls in their Leo years.
It works. It works really well. There are lots of young women who reply. They get hired. The deal, basically, is that Harvey Girls sign a 6-month contract to work for the company. They live in a dorm that is attached to the Harvey house, where they have a dorm mother that supervises them, which is usually an older, a spinster type figure that probably also works at the Harvey house as a manager, maybe not a manager, but, supervisor or something like that, to kind of keep an eye on them. They have a curfew. They are allowed male visitors, but they have to be in the parlor, or in a very, definitely not up to their room. No. They are also allowed to have a town social, or a dance on Friday nights, where the Harvey Girls are allowed to kind of mingle with the, local townsfolk. They have a uniform that changes only a couple of times. So, Julia, if you want to look at slides 5 and 6.
Oh my gosh, do I?
You can see the original Harvey Girl uniforms. And then the next one will be slightly later Harvey Girl uniforms. But do you want to describe for the people at home?
They're so cute.
Yeah, they are. I think they're cute.
So the Harvey Girl uniform is very simple. It looks like a black, well, I don't know, it's black and white. So a dark
black.
Colored, okay, so it is black. A black dress or shirt and skirt combo, but mostly the biggest thing that you can see is a large white apron that kind of wears like a pinafore, covers the shoulders but is sleeveless, and cinches at the waist before covering the entirety of the skirt beneath it. It looks like maybe they have collars or flat looking rectangle bow ties. I honestly don't know what those are.
Yeah, the original uniforms, they have like collars that I've heard them compared to like nuns' habits. Of like, oh, these girls are so attractive and these men haven't seen women in so long. They have to put them in nuns' uniforms. Like, good Lord. But yeah, later on they do get these little bow ties.
They're very modest. Like, these are not what you may think of when you think of Harvey Girls, in the sense of like when you were telling me about them, I was kind of thinking like a mix of sorority girls / like the showgirls that used to go on tour during World War II, or just like any other group of essentially objectified women.
Yeah.
That are just put in a space and like devoid of personality, kind of like the Rockettes.
Yeah.
But no, these are like pretty conservative. They're cute though.
Yeah. Like they have these like Harvey House reenactments or revivals or whatever where people like have outfits like these that they wear, and it's cute. It's usually like these little old ladies who like put on these reconstructed Harvey Girl uniforms, and they just look like they're so happy.
That's adorable. I did want to ask though, because you said that these were ads for women and girls. What sort of like class were they in? Because like they're essentially proper ladies, but they're not. Would they be like considered working class? I'm just so curious as to how like these girls would be considered superior, even though they are not necessarily of a high class.
That is a good question, which I think you're sort of previewing my next couple of bullets, which is fine. I think they're mostly like middle working class. It's more of like, not necessarily like proper in the sense that they come from a rich family, but just that like they have good manners, they have good etiquette, they know how to like dress and conduct themselves. Like, you know, rich girls wouldn't need to work, which is something we'll get into. So Harvey Girls work 6 days a week in 12-hour shifts, which is like kind of brutal. But after 6 months, you get a free train ticket to go anywhere on the Santa Fe line for a vacation.
Oh.
Which most of them do. A lot of them just go home because they are young women who are homesick. But the thing that is going to go back to your point about class, Julia, is like pay. So they get paid like pretty well. Obviously it changes over time with inflation, and you know, we're talking about a decent span of history. But they get a decent like base wage, plus they make tips, and their room and board is covered since they're living on company property, which is like really rare for women at this time period. Like there are very few jobs available to women at this point, right? You can be a teacher, you can like, I think we're at the point of like factory workers, but there's not much, right? Like you are definitely still relying on getting married as your meal ticket, which is why I think like this is a really good opportunity that a lot of women take, like I guess middle class and working class women, because they're able to like make their own money. And like, yes, they are being supervised, and they are like, a lot of their time is sort of taken up by work and things like that. But I mean, they have a lot of freedom in that sense, you know, like they get to be away from home. A lot of the accounts that I've read from Harvey Girls talk about like how it was hard, but like kind of good at the same time to be away from home, like out of their oftentimes like small town, away from their parents. I mean, it's kind of like college, right? Where you actually get to be independent and figure out like how to be a person.
I imagine just how, like, what an adventure it must be, especially during this time where, you know, like we talked about in the previous episode, you basically had to be with a group of women or escorted by a man to go anywhere or do anything.
Yeah, a lot of them describe this as an adventure, like using those words, which I think is really cool. Something else that every piece of media that I read, it ties in pretty nicely with the like idea of Fred Harvey like civilizing the West, which a lot of these articles mention like using Harvey Girls to civilize the West. in terms of like, oh, they bring in women who have manners and they show these like rough cowboys like how to behave and they like clean up the West in that way.
Let me just release a hefty sigh. Oh,
yeah.
Oh boy.
That's how I feel. I hate it. The other thing that I kind of hate that every single piece of media that I read that talked about the Harvey Girls talks about is they say, so there's a huge point in the contract to being a Harvey Girl that you must be single.
Oh.
So you're not allowed to be married?
Like K-pop idols.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. You are not allowed to be married, I guess, because they didn't want any distractions of, like, you have kids to take care of or you have a husband at home or something like that. Every piece of media that I read talked about, like, oh, so many Harvey Girls, like, broke that contract because they met someone and fell in love. I feel like I'm doing the Pepe Sylvia thing where I feel like I want to pull out my fucking hair. It just goes in. Oh, God, I'm getting so angry that I hit my pop filter.
The hands have come out. The hands are waving.
It goes with the, like, idea of, like, civilizing the West. Number one, like, that is gross to think about. Nobody can resist these, like, proper women, right? Like, these women, you know, they meet some rancher, farmer, cowboy, whoever over the lunch counter, and these men just, like, snap them up. Fred Harvey picks the best girls, and they just can't stay single for long.
You know, this is giving me, like, extreme Gatsby vibes in the sense of, like, Daisy and Gatsby and how, you know, she was kind of epitomized as a proper lady, a goal, civilization, a step above. And I don't know, I see, like, the same parallel here where it's like, oh, yeah, by having a proper lady as my wife, I am now moving up in society.
It's like a trophy wife, not in the sense of attractiveness, but like social status.
Yes. That's exactly it. It's like a trophy wife being like, I have a Harvey girl.
But it just seems like, I don't know, it's almost like, I feel like somebody has a gun to their head and they're like, don't worry. Like, all these Harvey girls definitely got married. 100%. They're all married. They all love men so much in a God-honoring way. Do not even sweat it. Putting these large groups of young women together. Nothing gay happened here. We don't know what lesbians are. It's fine. I don't know why you're so worried about it, you know? Like,
oh my gosh, yeah, good point.
That is sort of how it reads to me, but I may be projecting a little bit. I know we described kind of what the Harvey Girls look like in terms of their uniform, but Julia, I would like for you to read this little excerpt that I have. At some point, I think it's in the 1940s, the Fred Harvey Company has this, like, contest for, like, the best Harvey Girl in all of the restaurants. And so in, like, putting together this contest, they send out some materials of, like, this is what we are looking for the perfect Harvey Girl. And I should say, I meant to mention this at the top of the show, but I got this from the Northern Arizona University Special Collections and Archives, which is where I did a lot of my research. I probably owe the archivists over there my firstborn child at this point because I was there all the time this summer. So thank you to those wonderful archivists over there at NAU for letting me get my greasy little fingers on all of these really cool Fred Harvey documents. All that being said, Julia, please read for us a word portrait of what a customer expects of a Harvey sales girl and waitress.
Yes, ma'am. The representative Harvey waitress or sales girl is always courteous, greets her customers warmly, gives prompt and courteous service. She is always generous with smiles and thank yous. She is careful of her appearance. Her hair is worn neatly, if a waitress, of course, a net. She wears appropriate shoes, well polished. Her makeup is conservative. She is the user of an effective deodorant. Her behavior on the job is businesslike. She does not chew gum or handle her hair and face. You will not find her huddled in a group. She does no loud talking and does not hold extensive conversations with customers. The representative girl does not slouch on counters, tables, or chairs. She is never away from her station without permission. She is loyal to her employer, she is proud of her job, and Fred Harvey is proud of her. Yikey, yikey, yikeroonies. I don't like that.
Tell me what's most yikes to you about this.
Oh, I mean, that last line especially just, like, screams corporate loyalty.
Yeah, we're a family here.
Yeah, but it's also very much like, let us erase any sort of personality from a person, you know?
Yeah.
She has a perfect appearance. She does not have any sort of quirks. She smells nice, which is hard to do in the West at this time.
Yeah.
But she also, like, is not able to be a person in the sense of, like, she can't even have a conversation with a customer that's too long, and even though she's working a 12-hour shift, she can't slouch on counters, tables, or chairs, and, you know, has to get permission, I'm assuming, to go to the bathroom or something.
Yeah, probably so.
It's very much like the Harvey Girl is a robot. The perfect waitress is a robot who believes in corporate loyalty.
I think my favorite line in this, other than Fred Harvey is proud of her, is, "You will not find her huddled in a group." By itself, that is just funny to me, of like, oh, you know those women when they huddle in a group.
Huddling in groups. I think my favorite line is the user of an effective deodorant.
Yeah, she's not stinky.
She not stinky.
So that is my whole piece about the Harvey Girls. Specifically, they're, like I said, I've read too much about this family. Not only Fred Harvey, but his children and his grandchildren. So some other, like, wiggy quick hits that I wanted to include. So Fred's granddaughter, or Fred's son Ford, his daughter Kitty is a pretty much out lesbian and lives with her close friend.
Oh, her gal pal?
Yeah, Mary Perkins for many years, to the point where, like, it talks about, like, Kitty buys this house and Mary Perkins buys the cottage right next to it. Mary Perkins comes with the Harvey family on vacation. You can see pictures of Kitty and Mary Perkins on the next slide, Julia.
They look gay as heck.
Yeah, don't they?
That's a lesbian couple if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I know, right? I do mean this in the most complimentary way possible. Lesbians as hell.
In the best way, most beautiful way.
Yeah. They wear trousers. Neither of them ever get married, to the point where, like, the gossip columns kind of stop asking, you know, like, when is that Kitty Harvey gonna get married? They're just like, yeah, okay. They kind of give up. They smoke, drink, hunt, play cards, they fish. They're very outdoorsy, and I love that for them. Oh, this is another one that's going to cause a deep sigh. Both Fred and his oldest son, Ford, who I'm going to talk about in a second, he ends up running the company after Fred dies. So both Fred and Ford did not believe that women should hold stock. When Fred dies, his wife and daughters are all told that they should sell their shares in the company. His daughter, Minnie, who has been deeply involved in the business to this point, is, like, appalled, like, how dare you? But nevertheless, she has to sell her stock to her own husband, and the kicker is her husband doesn't have enough money, like cash, to buy these shares, so he has to borrow money from her to buy her shares of the company.
That's incredibly painful.
I hate it. It makes me very angry. Let's see. And then I think finally the last wiggy quick hit that I will give you is Fred Harvey Company's chief architect, Mary Coulter, designed many, many beautiful buildings for the company, many of which are still around today. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, she did a lot of those.
Oh.
She never got married, and she was a big success, even though at this time architecture was, like, a very male-dominated field.
Yeah.
She went to art school and everything. She lived to be, like, 80-something.
That's awesome.
Okay, so with the help of the Harvey Girls, the Fred Harvey Company expands. The Santa Fe Railroad continues to grow westward, and as the Santa Fe goes west, Fred Harvey also goes west, setting up more eating houses along the track lines. The fates of Fred Harvey and the Santa Fe Railroad become inextricably intertwined. Santa Fe makes Fred the exclusive caterer of the railroad. First is Harvey Houses, and then as basically like technology and engineering improves, they also take over dining cars. So at first, these Harvey houses are pretty small and modest. You know, they're just sort of like train depots with nice dining rooms. The train gets there, they stop, have a delicious meal while the train is getting refueled. They have a nice conversation with the Harvey girl, but not too long.
Not too long.
Not too long. And then they get back on the train and they get on their way. As the company grows and as economic conditions get better and better for the U.S. economy, Harvey houses become more luxurious, more elaborate. They develop into more like resorts and hotels for people to like stay a while instead of just for people getting from point A to point B.
Oh.
Which is especially true for national parks and the Southwest. So as we get to like New Mexico, Arizona. So here is our next stop in the U.S. history train, Choo. So with modernization and industrialization, we get, as I think we've talked about in the past on this podcast, the rise of the middle class, right? Mm-hmm. Families have more leisure time, they have more expendable income, and they start doing things like taking vacations, right?
Yeah.
Which gives the Harvey Company a new customer base. So they are not just catering to that traveling salesman anymore, but they're also catering to families who are traveling like for fun on vacation. There is also rising interest in U.S. national parks, specifically the Grand Canyon, and like nature, the great outdoors, those types of things. There is this like fascination with the Southwest and Indian culture, which is an entirely like other arm of the Fred Harvey story that we could talk about, but we don't have time for it, and it's not super related to food. Basically, all of these things are sort of culminating in the next, like, generation of Harvey houses. In 1901, Fred dies from colon cancer. So after he dies, his oldest son, Ford, runs the business for the next 27 years, from 1901 until Ford dies in 1928. Julia, please go to the next slide so that you can see Ford Harvey, and I need you to tell me your thoughts on Ford Harvey.
He looks like an absolute scam artist.
That's so funny, because I'm like, he is a handsome man.
No, yeah, exactly. He's handsome. Like, he's very handsome, especially in, like, that time period of the 1900s and, like, 1920s. Like, this man could have been, like, a movie star. Very handsome. But also, in the same way that a lot of handsome men can be, he looks like he's about to scam me out of my own pants.
This man will charm you out of your pocketbook, and you will say thank you so much.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he probably cheated on his wife, and as previously said, was sexist in the sense that he didn't think women should own stock. So he is perhaps our problematic fave of this episode, but what can you do? So Ford is like basically a mini version of his father. He has the same respect for standards and principles and like business practices, but he has less of a temper and most of a college education. He's willing to take bigger risks in a lot of ways, which is good during this period of the time when he runs the company, because he dies right before the stock market crash of the Great Depression.
Oh, boy.
The economy is on a full upswing. Ford's term at Fred Harvey Company is basically like, how big can we go? The biggest Harvey house or biggest project that Ford supervises would probably be El Tovar at the Grand Canyon. Do you know El Tovar, Julia?
I feel like maybe we saw it when we were there.
We like almost certainly saw it. I have pictures on the next two slides of the back and the front. It's kind of hard to miss in the sense that if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, El Tovar is the hotel that sits on the rim. So like if you stay at El Tovar, you look out your window and like you see into the rim of the Grand Canyon. You know, it's a risky investment, but it pays off and it does really well. And as we've said, El Tovar is still there. You can go and see it. You can go dine in the dining room, which is cool and very fancy. So this is sort of the height of the Fred Harvey Company. Like I said, you know, Ford has the advantage of like being in a rising U.S. economy. This is before the Great Depression. But from here, things, obviously, you know, nothing can be good forever. So in 1928, Ford dies of influenza.
Oof.
surprise twist. It's not like the flu pandemic of 1918, but it is like the second worst flu since then. And so he dies sort of earlier than everyone was expecting. And so as a result, there's this sort of like, I don't want to say struggle for power, but it's not clear who should take over, right? So the family sort of like splits duties for a while. And then we get the Great Depression, which obviously impacts the tourist business. So at that point, they sort of start paring back assets, right? They close some of these smaller Harvey houses and they focus on trying to maintain the bigger ones. At this point in history, train ridership is also starting to decline because at this point we've got the car, the automobile. So less people are taking the train, more people are driving, especially as we get like major highways like Route 66. There's less need for trackside dining as there was before. There's less of a need for trains are able to go longer. There are dining cars so that people don't have to get off the train. So generally, business just sort of like starts to decline. During World War II, there is renewed interest and nostalgia for Harvey houses. So during World War II, there are a lot of troops that are being sent on the train, like back and forth across the country to various military bases or being shipped off to war. So Harvey Girls are called back into service to help feed these trains full of soldiers. So, like, there's this post-war boom that happens. So, like, during World War II, everyone's like, yeah, remember those Harvey houses and those Harvey Girls? Mm-hmm. And that kind of continues after World War II because, you know, families have even more disposable income and, like, time to travel. Yeah. But eventually, you know, around, like, early to mid-1950s, I mean, the wave of nostalgia kind of dies down, right? And so they, again, scale back their business.
It's like when they tried to bring back the rainforest cafes.
Yeah, yes, it is like that.
And it's like, the nostalgia maybe could have made this last for like a year, but I think people are remembering that they didn't actually like Rainforest Cafe.
So you may be wondering, we talked about El Tovar, you may be wondering, like, what is left of this giant empire today? So in the 1970s, Fred Harvey Company was bought by this big conglomerate called AmFac. And then in the 1990s, AmFac is bought by Xanterra. It's funny because when I lived in Flagstaff, I used to drive by the Xanterra headquarters almost every day. Xanterra is still around. They own only a couple of the original Harvey houses or like operate them. You can still visit several of them, which I have, not to brag, but for research, I did go and eat at a lot of Harvey houses. So like I said, some are no longer connected with Xanterra because they were like sold off at various points, but they have been like refurbished or they're operating under a new name, but you can still go and eat there, or they have a lot of the original infrastructure. Some of them have been refurbished into other things. There are some that have been turned into museums. There is one in Kansas, I believe, that is now a dinner theater, of all things.
Ooh.
So that's cool. But unfortunately, a lot of Harvey houses have been demolished. So Julia, I would like you to read this incredibly depressing quote from the Fred Harvey Company Wikipedia page.
Oh boy.
It is 2 sentences, but I think it encapsulates a lot.
El Navajo, Gallup, New Mexico, closed and demolished, 1957. This building, designed by Mary Coulter as a tribute to Native Americans, became a parking lot. That hurt.
Is that not like the most depressing thing you've ever read?
That hurt really bad. Ooh, yeah. Ow.
So sad. Other things that are still around, they did make a movie in the 1940s about the Harvey Girls. It's very much like a show businessy version of the Harvey Girls, but it stars Judy Garland, if you know her. Do you know her?
Yeah, of course I know her.
Also, if you want to go to your next slide, Julia, have you seen a train like this before?
I have, in fact.
So that is a BNSF train, or from the Burlington Northern and Santa Fe Railway. So in 1996, the Atchinson, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad merged with Burlington Northern to become the BNSF. So if you have ever seen these, like, I feel like pretty famous, like, orange and black trains, that's them. That is the remnants of the Santa Fe Railway.
Dude, that's wild. I feel like I see them here in Bozeman. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I do see them here in Bozeman.
I mean, like, they are, I believe when I was looking this up, they are the biggest railroad in the U.S. today. So, almost certainly. And lastly, I think to close us out, as I teased in a previous episode, I have read a lot of Fred Harvey menus. So I think we should look at one of those, but I wanted to make like a little bit of a game out of it.
Oh boy, a game! Yay!
Games! So Julia, on this last slide, we are going to take, we will decide where the final stop on our train journey is going to be. So we can go to the Alvarado in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1933. Or we could go to Union Station in Kansas City, Missouri in 1951. Or we can go to El Tovar at the Grand Canyon in 1912. Wherever we choose to go, we're going to look at the menu and you and I are going to decide what we're going to have for dinner.
Well, I absolutely adore how crazy old food menus were. So I think I'm going to have to go El Tovar. Oh yeah, I'm looking at it. This is exactly what I live for. What the hell is a TronCon? I don't even know.
I love the Salisbury steak a la Stanley. Who is Stanley?
Who is Stanley?
Is that just like the name of the chef? I don't know. So what are you ordering, Julia? I know that we are both limited a bit by allergies, which they almost certainly were not considering in 1912, but...
But definitely the TronCon of halibut. Let's see, what else they have? Ooh, a tomato salad. Gotta get that. What is a snow pudding? I don't know. But I am gonna go for some tangerines as like a nice dessert. And then probably some coffee.
Okay, I think I'm going with the roast young turkey with cranberry sauce, cauliflower au gratin, and candied sweet potatoes.
That sounds pretty good.
Very Thanksgiving. I'm going to gamble with assorted cakes. I'm just going to see what they have in the case. And maybe as I discussed in a previous food fact of the day, maybe I will finish off with some cheese. I don't know what Sierra cheese is, but I'm interested by it.
I don't know either.
Well, thanks for coming with me on this journey, Julia, as our train just sort of slowly rolls in. Grab the handle and let us depart.
Let's go. Thanks for lunching with us.
Thanks for lunching with us.
We'll see you next time.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Our theme music is Red Onions by Louis Zong. Please check out the rest of his album Vegetable Soul in the description. You can follow us on Twitter at Girls Lunch. Nicole is also on Twitter at NicoleH262, and her website is NicoleHilton.com. Julia is smarter than all of us and not on social media. Thank you for listening. The Santa Fe is not run by any of the major railroad tycoons.
Oh,
like,
no.
If you've ever heard of Andrew Carnegie. Have you heard of Andrew Carnegie?
Oh,
no, Julia, you're frozen.
We've lost internet connection.
Julia, are you there?
Okay.
Hello?
This is going to be a
Oh,
problem.
no.